Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there. Welcome back.
Welcome back, guys. So, we want to thank our newest Patreons for their support.
Indeed, we do. We want to say a huge thank you to Ingrid, Annette, CP, and Terry Boogie. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for your support and joining us over on Patreon. And again, when you do find Evolutionary over on Patreon, you can also watch videos over from there, just to let you know, and join for free, which you wouldn't get the exclusives that we do about every 3 days or so. We'll put one up that's Patreon only, and speak very clearly, and it feels really good.
It does.
Okay, so this video is just going to focus in on a little bit that, boy, we could go into some serious tangents with. Psychologist Stanley Milgram found that 80% of the population do not have the psychological or moral resources to defy an authority's order, no matter how illegitimate the order is. Therefore, only 20% have critical thinking capacity. This explains quite a lot. Well, this was a very, very interesting experiment that literally happened in my own backyard. And what inspired this experiment back in the 60s was the capture and trial of Adolf Eichmann. And, again, this is part of the NAZI brain trust. And, he was described, as you see here, the Holocaust's architect in so many different ways. How could people do such atrocities? Well, apparently, according to this experiment, in some ways it's in our DNA. And, yet at the same time, I do not think we're trapped by it. But we are, absolutely. We have been conditioned to accept authority without question, and conditioned absolutely by society, by indoctrination, by our political structure, our religious structure. It's just a given. And here you see him surrounded and in the process of being tried. The things that were done to people during this time were indescribable and horrible. The fact is, it's not just this time, and it wasn't just this political group that have done this. What was done in World War II as well, on other sides, and World War I, and without there being wars. Now, wars do present a tremendous opportunity to dark, evil, sadistic forces. Because, again, in war, kind of anything goes. There's mass confusion. People don't understand exactly what's happening. Often communications are totally cut. Often there's this isolation that allows atrocities to be committed. And often things are just not even really uncovered. And that is part of the reason why war is used by the structure of this planet, the real control structure.
Mm-hmm. It is. And to me, when I look at this, it really all boils down to what is the reward system? What's the reward for this person to do this thing? And it also goes back to our educational system. It's indoctrinating and having people accept information, regardless of what their inner self is thinking. And something that Mike and I do, we practice getting anchored into ourselves so that when we are doing things, we're doing it with our spirit mind. We're not doing it with just an automatic reflex because somebody told us to. And I think that's where critical thinking, and that's really a huge concern because a lot of people are waking up to that right now. They're waking up to, hey, why did I do things this way? I can do things this other way, and I can get in touch with my soul, my spirit. But going back to all of this indoctrination in our educational system, it's all tied in, and it just keeps unraveling. So now I'm looking at this, and I can parallel this to some, what we would perceive to be fun shows like Survivor. They'll do things to each other but look at the reward system. What do they get out of that? And to me, this is no different. They're doing something. People, you have to sit and think, what is this person getting out of this? There's always a reward. And we have to look at that closely, because this is part of our behavior that can be manipulated.
Yeah, and people are manipulated constantly, and we're manipulated not to step out of boxes, those societal boxes. They want to keep you in those societal boxes. You know, when you move to a new location in the South, you know, you always get invited to everybody's church, because everybody goes to church because that's the way they were brought up. And they don't, you know, they don't buck the trend. The conditioning has set so tightly in their mind that it's a good thing to do. And thus it's not even questioned. It's not even questioned. And in many people's minds, again, you know, you grow up in a Republican area, it's not even questioned that you have to vote Republican. You grow up in a Democratic one, same thing for the most part. What's happening now, though, naturally, the sunlight is interacting with our DNA, and it's literally flicking the breakers into the on position where they have been turned off. And what we're looking at here is a photograph. So they put an ad in the paper, and they look for volunteers, you know, come get paid so much money to take part in clinical experiments, scientific experiments. Now, these experiments were, they were really acting, as so many are. And you know, you can see people hooked up to these machines. And here you see in 1963, Stanley Milgram created an experiment to see if participants would follow orders even when the requested behavior went against their moral beliefs or good judgment. So you have a fake test subject that's asked questions and pretends to feel pain, because you have somebody over here that is administering the shock. The subject here is going to administer the shock. They're going to ask questions, and then you have a person who is urging the participant to keep going, and this person's making his notes, and he's acting like he's the clinician, and he's, you know, writing down how the person is answering. But what the person that is administering the shock doesn't know is that this is all just a setup, and really it's not to elicit particular responses here. It's all about how far this person will go. So a researcher asks the participant to administer electric shocks to a test subject when he answers the questions incorrectly. The test subject is an actor who makes noises of pain when he receives the shocks. The participant is made to believe that each shock is stronger than the last one. And so when you're going to the, you know, you're going from a mild shock and a mild response to extreme, to where it feels like you might actually end up having the person pass out, faint, or worse. And how far will the person go who's getting paid to do this? And this is really goes back to what we initially were looking at. It's the fact that, yeah, people went much, much farther, and they did this experiment also utilizing the clinician, or the parent clinician, who is nothing but an actor, dressing up like he was a doctor. And that helps. So when you see uniforms, this is one of the takeaways. When you see uniforms of any sort do convey authority. And that has been instilled in our consciousness. This is part of it. So you could take illegitimate people that are, you know, actors, not really people that have gone through specific training even. Just slap that uniform on, and people will blindly obey.
Mm-hmm. And I think all of this is just really to mark where society is at. Where is the collective consciousness? They need to have these experiments. And yes, this was a very brutal time, but they needed to know where are humans at. And today it's simply translated to a lot of a lot of shows that are on TV, you know, like Big Brother, like Survivor, there's some type of reward system. And they admit on there in the opening of these shows, you know, they say these are experiments, you know, with human nature. So they do it on a broad spectrum right now. It's just that this has been going on the whole time. And, you know, it's something that I think we should be able to evolve on our own. Like, if you look at Native Americans and how they raise their children, they would watch their children play. And in effect, they would learn, what is this child strong with? Is he strong with hunting? Is he strong with tracking? Is he strong with working with plants? And then they would take that child and they would specialize that child all their life to do hunting, tracking, working with herbs. And by the time they were adults, they were absolute, total and complete professionals at what they did. Nothing could beat them. They were amazing. They were awesome. And, you know, leave it to our military to even take these indigenous people and bring them in and study them too. So it's just something, I think awareness is key. And once you know better, you tend to do better. So if you know you're being manipulated, that actually helps. It helps you make different decisions based on you and what you want, not what other people are telling you.
Absolutely. So, you know, the initial experiment, 40 men recruited using newspaper ads. In exchange for their participation, each person was paid $4.50. That sounds like nothing. But in 1961 to 63, you know, that was quite a bit of money, relatively. But still, when you get down to this and think about what people actually did, he developed an intimidating shock generator with shock levels starting at 15 volts and increasing in 15-volt increments all the way up to 450 volts. The many switches were labeled with terms including slight shock, moderate shock, and danger severe shock. The final 3 switches were simply labeled with an ominous XXX. And people were willing to go to that level for $4.50. This is just insanity, but this is the public. This is the strength of the indoctrination. We shared with you as well in other videos how when coming over from Spain and Portugal, the Christian, quote unquote, conquistadors had decrees from the church basically saying that, you know, the church decrees that this land is ours and you are all our slaves. This paper right here, let me read it to you, right? They would say to them who didn't understand the language at all. Right. This paper says, you know, you all belong to the church. You all belong to us now. And we could take anything from amongst you. And they did. They took a lot of young females to be slaves and bring them back, as well as strong young males to work and you know, slave away. It was the religious authority that inferred with many of these sailors, conquistadors, you know, explorers, the legitimacy of doing atrocities upon other humans. And this has happened time and time again because they wear the robes, you know, of the Catholic Church, or it doesn't have to be the Catholic Church. It could be any other institution. Atrocities were committed. This is where, again, part of the big purpose I feel for our channels is to show how when you have that indoctrination that overreaches everything to where, you know, it hit me, and I shared with you guys before. And when I was a kid going to Bible study, my tutor, who was like 65-year-old, maybe 70 gentleman, when we were talking about the end times and, you know, this time period that we're living in right now, he would say, well, you know, we're all going to be up in the clouds with Jesus. We're just going to watch it happen. And I said, what do you think you're going to be doing? He said, I'll be rooting them on. I'll be saying, go ahead, go get them, God. And it's like, okay, I had enough of this. You know, this guy's a raving lunatic. This guy is somebody that would end up doing just what, you know, the NAZI soldiers did because he thinks it's the will of God, and he's just deluded. But this is what they've used time and time again. And so this interesting little experiment that was done by Yale New Haven, which again, Skull and Bones Society, the Bushes, John Kerry, and we could go back to so many others that come out of these secret societies. If you look to these institutions, especially like Yale and Harvard in the U.S., Oxford over in and Cambridge, these are indoctrination centers. And this is where they take what they view to be the best and the brightest, and they turn them into people that will hit that triple X switch all day long, and maybe for a little bit more than $4.50. But it's very, very telling. This is why, again, expanding the consciousness is so key. So I'll give you guys the links to the experiments from 3 different perspectives there. In 2013, scientists who dedicated 13 years to studying the human genome made a fascinating claim asserting that human DNA was engineered by extraterrestrial beings. So you have these different scientists that say, wow, we have been absolutely engineered. DNA is programming. DNA is programming. And, if you look to Wi-Fi, we have our own Wi-Fi. Again, what is the visible world? The visible world is not even 1,000th of all that exists. All that exists is on so many different, what we would call densities, different frequencies, different wavelengths. If you are, again, equating it to a radio dial, like an old-fashioned radio where you actually turn the knob, you might be able to go through the AM band and pick up, if you're lucky, and you're in a city, 60, 70 different channels. And then you flip it to FM and you get more. Well, again, it's kind of like that. Everything that we see is just one tiny little wavelength. There is so much more. As I've said so many times, beings, are constantly walking through you all day long. Consciousness abounds. It's everywhere. And ultimately, we are consciousness. Now, here is the thing that is their next big part of their programming to come, which is, again, showing the Anunnaki and saying, hey, here's mom and dad. These are, and they're also going to make it out so that they are all the gods. They are some that they are actually not, because not all the mythologies are talking about the Anunnaki gods. No. The farther back we go in time, the more real, true, benevolent beings we are encountering. It's nearer to this time period that we encounter more and more of those in the dark matrix, because these are the ones that have been controlling us. And the human DNA genome, it was altered by these extraterrestrials. But no, the Anunnaki are not our creators. They're not the creators even of our bodies. They've just altered things. And when we look to our DNA, it's programming. Think of this in terms of computers. It is programming, and it can be reprogrammed at any time. It really can. We have trillions of cells. Our chromosomes, at the ends of the chromosomes, there are telomeres. It's postulated that as the telomeres wear out, that is what is giving us aging. Again, in other ages, we live much longer. The only reason we live so short is because of the system. And as soon as you get outside the system, like literally, there will be people that are totally outside the system in just maybe a decade, you completely outside of the system. And give it 20 years time, kids born outside of this system will be living extremely advanced ages. Now, the power structure is going to offer you immortality, but it's merging with AI. It's merging with their technology because, again, they want to keep you as a human energy source indefinitely. Your soul, that part of you which is just simply animating this body, because that's what we do. We animate bodies, and then we return to the higher densities where we don't have bodies like this. That part they want to trap. indefinitely in something they could keep going indefinitely. It's all about conditioning. Dr. Bruce Lipton's done some great books. The Biology of Belief, Spontaneous Evolution. These two fabulous books, I can tell you firsthand, read them. Wonderful. I mean, gobble them up. You could, just, they're the type of books that you'll go through in 1 or 2 sittings. We can reprogram ourselves. They don't want you to know that, but we can. And also, the true creator of this realm and the source of all things is reprogramming humans as we speak.
And Mike does such a good job at going over the history and pointing things out. And I love to take the history and look at what they're doing now and tie those two things together. And right now, what you see in the paper is, there's these experimental procedures that people can sign up for. And, oh, yes, by the way, you will get compensation, but you have to sign certain things. So they're still doing it today. It's just under a different guise. Where you look back then, somebody goes to court over that. But today, they're totally free to do whatever they want. And it's quite disgusting, and you look at Gil Bates, he's another one that he tinkers with computers. Well, because he has direct lines to these other entities, he's tinkering with the human DNA. So he is taking his practice and putting it into people quite literally on the most literal sense, changing the DNA in the 3D form. When that happens, also what is changed is the etheric DNA. And then we're looking at all of these Wi-Fis, we're looking at all of these EMFs, and it makes it very difficult for the soul to function in this soup of EMF. What we should be doing is connecting to our soul spirit, our spirit mind, our inner self, strengthening our own original DNA in ourselves. And this helps give us a very strong connection to source itself. It gives us a strong connection to the higher mind. And this is what I think we try to do, is we give people the understanding to say, hey, I don't want to do this. I want to walk down this road, but you don't know until you know. I mean, that's really, really scary. The world that we have is just something, it's like, well, when you know, and if you don't, you don't. And we're trying to get the information out there so more people know, so they have that opportunity to connect with their higher self in a very organic way. And Mother Earth, I mean, she has everything that we need to correct anything that's wrong with us. And it sometimes people get sick. It might take a little digging, because they definitely hide all of the medicinal corrections that we need. They keep that hidden. They keep that coveted. So we're walking this road ourselves when it comes to natural healing. It is very difficult sometimes, but the answers are out there. If you're on a natural path, keep looking, keep going. Never give up. Never give up.
So when you look at the scientific part of this, one of the things that hit me when I was studying biology was the fact that the system's always clicking in my head, and I'm always seeing things and I'm going, this is why they're doing that. This is why they're doing this. Because again, this is talking about chromatin modification, epigenetic reprogramming in mammalian development. When we look at it, it goes through methylation and histone modification. When you think about what they've done to humanity, all of us, again, inflammation is the root cause of most disease out there. Inflammation. I mean, we could see just loads of inflammation when we just look over at that food pyramid. Then we think about all the genetically modified foods out there that are causing so much more inflammation. Everything is all about, there's multiple purposes to everything they do. They are very smart. They've done this before. There's multiple layers to all this. When you're looking at reprogramming of cell identity, it's again, how do they stop that which is natural? Because that has been their prime motive. They know that the cycle of the yugas comes. They know that the light from source is coming. The light is information, and that information encodes within our DNA. It changes our DNA, mutates our DNA, and we literally change. Our consciousness is going to start to expand. You could think of it again as going over to your electric panel and realizing, oh, well, this is why that wasn't working. Most of the breakers are turned off. There's just a couple of breakers turned on. Well, that's how it is with us. Most of our breakers have been turned off. They're not coding. They're not functioning. And the key is again, they bring on nonstop, constant states of immune system dysfunction, mostly, again, often through inflammatory processes, which, again, leads to clouding our thought. It leads to us really not understanding what's going on. And thus, we are better human robot batteries, food. Again, 97% of our DNA has a higher purpose. It's not junk. No. Again, they've turned off most of what we really are. And some people have these switches turned on, and then we think of them as exceptional. We think of them as, special, gifted, like Teslas of the world. How could he know so much? How can he be so, maybe he was an alien, maybe he was a starseed. Yeah, perhaps. Maybe simply he just had another couple switches turned on that the rest of us don't have turned on. How can Cindy interact and see pretty much anybody that's passed on the other side? And we don't always share all of what she sees because it would be too dangerous to put it straight out there. As quite often the dead have stories to tell, and the dead will quite often be very angry that they're no longer here in the 3D when all of a sudden they were turned on by those that they had trusted. Yeah, 97% of our DNA is basically, this is that which they will claim ownership over you about when they do say the Anunnaki are our parents, when they do roll them out and say, we made you. No, you didn't make us. Because, again, we know the soul, that which is the real self, is eternal. It's unmade. It's unborn. And if you are someone who's delved deeply into a lot of the esoteric traditions, into Eastern philosophy, or if you've gone down the mystery tradition side and looked at some of the inner circle rituals about the bornless one, yeah, that's us. Our consciousness is source. We are from source. We are fractals. We are all fractals. Again, think of a kaleidoscope reflecting light in different ways and different patterns. That's all of us. And what they've done is they have tried to cut us off from our higher selves, our real selves, and from source and the creator of this universe.
Mm-hmm. We're definitely changing, and we're changing at a very rapid pace. So, we all have to choose which path do we want to go down, because the awakening is happening whether we're ready or not. And that can be a very scary thing. It can be very difficult to deal with, because that comes with it purging. It comes with it, recognizing the shadow side. It comes with it shadow work. It comes with it probably some very physical type of energies that we don't understand. And make no mistake that these, when we have physical issues, it's known at a certain level what's happening to our bodies. Our bodies are getting upgrades, but most people are going to go see a a DR, and they're just going to get a pill to cover that up instead of having the person work through it and find themselves in a higher place. They're just going to give something to be covered up, and that can be very dangerous. I mean, that's like trying to bypass the whole system. Eventually it's going to short out. Why? Because you haven't maintained all of the needed wiring to connect with higher self. So like I'm saying, you're going to connect with higher self no matter what. If you're having physical ailments, if something is wrong, you definitely want to pick up a mind-body practice. Connect with nature. I mean, look at this little girl. If you're not looking at the screen, look at she's sitting here talking. She's teaching. They're bowing to each other. You know, they're honoring each other. They're saying namaste to each other. And this is therapy. I mean, she's so happy. It's happening naturally. And this is the world that we should live in. Everything should come naturally. It shouldn't ever be forced, ever.
I hope you guys got something out of this. Look forward to your comments. Much love, source bless, and namaste.
Namaste.